So I'm Signe, I'm from wonderful Copenhagen, which is indeed wonderful, but it's also the name of the organization that I represent. And just a note on that Narita thing on teaching manners to men, I think let's start by teaching them to use an oven, basically. But, all right, well, but I promised to just say a little bit about the organization that I'm from, Wonderful Copenhagen, which is, and this is actually a slide that I was asked by Martin to do, and I realized now I fell right into his trap, because I put in DMMO, which is basically how we describe ourselves, as a destination marketing and management organization. But we're also the convention bureau, we have large cruise networks, and we actually also have a national development role. And I think this context is quite important because we don't actually see ourselves solely as a DMO, we fit into a landscape. So I agree with Martin in the sense that we can't actually take the sole responsibility for managing the destination, but we add the destination to the overall management responsibility. We work very closely with Copenhagen Capacity, that works to attract investment and talent to Copenhagen. They're a sister organization. We're based in the same building. We're part of what we call Greater Copenhagen, which is the metropolitan region. So it actually includes 2 Danish regions and 1 Swedish. Imagine the political uproar on that, but it works really well. We also work very closely with the Ministry of Commerce, who has the National Tourism Strategy, where we're a big part of that. We actually lift 2 national tasks in that. We lift what they call the Association of Bigger Cities, as well as the Meeting Association across the entire country. And then finally, of course, we work closely with Copenhagen City and their urban development strategy. So this is the introduction to my organization that I represent, Wonderful Copenhagen. And we actually meet quite often, twice a year at least, all the European cities' DMOs. And whenever we meet, it's basically one session of DMOs Anonymous, where we share our frustrations with the political landscapes and all the changes that we're going through, because there's always noise. There's always noise in the country of tourism, and that's basically what we all have to deal with. So what you just saw about our organization will change, and it changes all the time. And this is just one of the things that makes it really fun to work in tourism. But it's also one of the things that requires you to keep your focus on the end goal and have the ongoing discussions on how do we sort of keep out the noise and focus on how do we actually deliver better cities and destinations. So what I'm going to tell you about is a strategy, first of all, that we launched in the early 2017. And when we launched it, we actually declared the end of tourism as we know it. So very close to Paul's, it's the end of travel or the death of travel, but we declared the end of tourism. And of course, this was kind of a big deal. A lot of people thought we lost our heads. What are you doing? You're the official tourism organization of Copenhagen, and you're declaring the end of it. But what we really wanted to do was also make a statement. Because there is a tendency within tourism to think that it's like, we're on it. I know things are changing, but we're on it. But by declaring the end of tourism, we really want to say, no, it's not changing. It has changed. And we talk about digitalization. And the digitalization is coming. The digital era is coming. But that's not it. We're digital. And if you're not digital, you're not it anymore. So this is really a realization that it has changed, and you need to work with it as such. Tourism wanted is just another thing that we're thinking. We keep talking about tourism growth, we want more tourism, but we also have an era upon us that is over tourism. So basically we need to stop talking about winter is coming, because winter is already here. So that's really part of why we declared the end of tourism as we know it. Of course, we did that by looking in different directions. What's happening outside of our little world of Denmark and Copenhagen? And we came up with these 8 road signs to a new beginning. And actually, when I was preparing my presentation for today, I realized we were doing these in 2016. And it doesn't seem that long ago, but it actually is. And I think we would have done them differently today. So this was actually a really important reflection for me coming here. But of course, some of them still hold relevance today. And one of the things that we came out with when we launched the strategy was this very intuitive conclusion. Because there's a tendency, and I'm sure a lot of you know that working in tourism as you do, there's a tendency to see tourists as one certain type of person, as a species in itself. As if when you go traveling, you change into the tourist. But actually, and this is very intuitive, but actually tourists are all kinds of people. Everyone in this room is a tourist at some point, much like everyone in here is a local at some point. And I know this is very basic, but it's actually a really good realization, and it's something that has changed the way that we work with tourism. So as we were doing our strategy, we came up with a new vision for us as a destination, but also for our city, Copenhagen. And the vision is localhood for everyone. And for those of you who are perhaps native English speakers, I am not myself, localhood is actually a word that we invented, and we did that on purpose because we wanted it to be something that has sort of a local ownership as well. It's something we feel very strongly about. And it's also a word that we then get to define because it doesn't exist. So you can't check it in a dictionary, not yet, but I hope it will be one day. And so that also means that we didn't actually put in the strategy a definition of localhood, because we want it to be something that is dynamically defined. So we do work with a phrase much like this one, but I actually had a conversation last night with one of you guys. I'm not going to say who, but I had a good conversation yesterday. And someone said, well, you know, the thing about Copenhagen, it doesn't have that big attraction, but there's a vibe. There's a vibe to Copenhagen. And that vibe is something that you feel both as a visitor, but it's also something that you feel when you're a local. It's basically, you know, that sense of somewhere. Copenhagen isn't just anywhere, it's somewhere. And it's that somewhere, that special vibe that localhood is all about. And localhood is for everyone in the sense that it's not just about providing a localized experience. It's not solely about authenticity. It's actually also about that which makes Copenhagen the place that you love the most, as a local, as a business, as an investor, as a tourist, as a student, and so on. So this is what localhood is really about. It's a big vision for us. So we launched January 2017. We're one year and a half in, and that's the new question, right? The big question is, so what now? What are you doing about it? And we're trying, we're still loading, and we're doing different things to really achieve this big vision for us. But the thing about it, it's a 2020 strategy, but actually the whole idea of the strategy was also to point a direction further ahead. It was a statement, and in many ways, and don't tell anyone, even though this is being videoed or taped, don't tell anyone, this isn't actually a plan, it's more of a movement. And you could say a movement, and what's the role of a DMO in creating a movement? Well, in Copenhagen, our role is also to start the difficult conversations. And localhood is a difficult conversation because it changes the mindset, and it's a conversation we need to have, and we actually started that conversation by declaring the end of tourism. So it was quite dramatic, really, but it's important because we need that conversation to be in a better place in 2 years, in 5 years, and in 10 years. Because in Copenhagen, the growth continues. So we'll have 8,200 new rooms in Copenhagen by 2022. That's a 46% increase from today. So this is huge. This is a huge increase in rooms. So that also means that we'll have a huge increase in visitors coming. And so we need to have this conversation on how do we manage it. And I agree with Martin, it's not solely the DMO that can manage this. And sometimes even we are actually expected to manage things that are sort of out of our control, but we do have a role in raising the question. And we have a role in making it work. So, So what we have been doing is actually, and it may sound a little bit boring, but we've done a lot of research. And one of the things that we've kept researching is also, what is this thing about local perception of tourism? Because we're not in the situation as a lot of our European colleagues yet. We still have large support among our locals to tourism. As you can see from this graph, and the white one shows how many locals in Copenhagen actually see no problem at all, 67%, which is somewhat above the European benchmark of 42%. But we also have a larger population that actually sees issues certain times a year. And this is, of course, something that we need to react on now, so we don't actually, you know, it's better to be proactive than reactive. It gives us a little bit of space to work on it. But what we also need to do is understand the dimensions of the problem, because we're talking a lot about over-tourism. But what is it really? And it's actually not necessarily only a question of crowdedness. So basically what you can see here is the blue one is, I'm pointing here. Yeah, the blue one is Copenhagen, and the pink one is sort of the European norm. So I think it's like 12 benchmark cities in Europe. And what you can see is actually for Copenhageners, it's not necessarily the overcrowdedness that is the big problem. It's traffic, it's noise, and it's issues of cleanliness in the city. And so this is really interesting because it also shows us that we need to work with it in many different ways. It's not just a question of spreading tourism out, because it's not necessarily only the crowds. There's a different perception that we need to work with. And when we dive deeper, and what's really interesting is actually that the locals and the visitors are very alike. They're actually very alike, also in the way that they use the city. And this surprised us somewhat, because we talk about tourism ghettos or like areas that become too touristy for the locals to go there. But when we did our research, we could actually see that the locals and the visitors, they love the same places. They all go to the inner city, and that's what they really want to do. Furthermore, they also all expect the same thing of the tourist behavior. So the local expectations to tourist behavior and the tourist's own expectations to their behavior are really similar. It's, take care of the environment, behave according to local norms and customs. But the disappointment sometimes is bigger for the locals because they actually don't see the tourists as such. And the real clashes happen because they're in the same areas, they're doing a lot of the same things, but the real clash is that they're doing it somewhat differently. And one of the major clashes in Copenhagen, and I'd be curious to see if it's the same in Amsterdam, is on bikes. Because we bike a lot in Copenhagen. We have 62%, I think it is, of all Copenhageners bike to work or to school every day. It's a huge thing to bike. And it's something that we're very proud of. It's also something that we expect the tourists to do. It's the right way to experience Copenhagen, but not when I'm on the bike lane. So if you see a tourist in the morning on the bike lane in experience mode and you're there in transportation mode, it's the most annoying thing ever. And so this is really a big issue because that's the key of it. It's when you're doing it in different modes. And that's also why you see traffic issues as one of the major things about over-tourism in Copenhagen, not just for the bikes, but it's also the traffic that you notice. So it's the tourist buses, because you see them, they're very visible. So it's the very visible tourism, and it's the tourism that acts upon a different mode than you do. So, to sum up, we're still on a journey. And I tried to sort of sum up a little bit, I think, the journey that we're on and where we're at right now. So I put in different movements. So I think we're in our mindsets, we're moving from a very commercial mindset to a community mindset. That basically means that we're moving a little bit away from being solely upon the destination to understanding that we're part of a place, we're part of a community, and basically we need to work with that community. We're moving from destination to localhood. Again, this is the integrated agenda, understanding that our destination is part of a place, is part of a city, is part of an investment hub, and so on. And basically, a really important one, and I think if I was rewriting the strategy today, this would be much more highlighted. We're moving away from seeing the goal as tourism growth, and rather seeing tourism as a means to a better city, as a means to improve the life for locals and for visitors alike. We're moving out of the tourism bubble. I'm sure everyone in here can recognize that bubble. And we're starting to see the bigger picture. And the last one is a little bit different from that, though they are somewhat similar. But we're also moving away from seeing tourism as our territory. And we're inviting everyone else into that territory as an open source. Because there is a tendency to think that tourism solutions should be found within tourism. But we need to open it up. We need to invite new perspectives, new mindsets. And we need to take a new responsibility. So we're not there yet in Copenhagen at all. But at least we're having the conversation. So, is it a mission impossible? I don't think so. We're trying. So if you shake things up, sometimes things become possible. Yeah, thank you. That's it from me.